just before we start with some questions, it's always interesting to get some audience reaction. And by the way, you guys are welcome to ask questions and encouraged to ask questions at any time, or we'll have some question section a little bit later on. Who's aware of what angel funding is? Just like a show of hands. I guess you have to be, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Who's taken angel funding? Anyone interested in taking angel funding or to do more of it in the future? Yeah, okay. So I was going to start off by talking a little bit about angel funding, but Teemu made the dangerous mistake of using the word definition when a lawyer's around. Of course, we love things like definitions. It's like,
my bad.
Yeah, I know. You were talking about like what's the definition of a super angel in relation to Yardi. So what would you understand, like what's your experience of being an angel been like?
Okay, great question. A couple of things. I think first of all, you know, the super angel needs to understand the business they're investing in. This means like in games, you know, they, in my opinion, they need to have a track record of actually being part of successful ventures and companies. And then the most important thing for super angel, in my opinion, is to make sure that there's a clear dotted line from the seed funding to Series A. So the angel has to be able to, either they're gonna, you know, do the A round by themselves, or they need to get, you know, the VCs to commit to Series A. And that's the most crucial part of super angel, in my opinion. Like, and even like it goes as far as maybe even Series B, if that's the case. But you know, they need to have a clear idea on how the company is going to get funded if they need more funding in the future.
This was something that Klaas and I were talking about earlier, the idea that an integral part is some understanding about what happens after you've taken the money on as well. And you were making the observation that there won't always necessarily be a follow-on round, but at least you have to understand where the company's going afterwards.
Well, looking at the European ecosystem, with the exception of Finland maybe, there are not that many VCs that actually do Series A, Series Bs in gaming anymore, unless the team has been successful in the past or they are showing a track record which is like crazy. So what you have to be prepared for as a super angel, I hate the term by the way, is, as you said, either do the Series A by yourself and be capable of doing so, or work out something with the company that they are able and willing and aware of the fact that there might be no additional financing after the first one.
And Chris, you've got interests that straddle both sides, but not just on the angel side, but also going up further beyond that as well into VCs. So.
Yeah, so I decided to become an LP in a fund as well, partly to try and understand that ecosystem and try and understand their approach and what they were looking for. They're not exclusively in games. They do consumer web, consumer mobile, but they have 2 or 3 very successful investments in games as well. But it's critical that as an angel you understand if they require more finance, where they can get that from, and that you help facilitate that, either that's through introductions or through understanding how to position and in many ways kind of decorate the business to be appropriate for the funding that they're trying to deploy. I think my other definition, and I also don't like the term super angel, but if you try to define it, is it's kind of, I think, making multiple investments. So there are obviously a number of angels that make 1 or 2 investments. I think from my experience, what I've found is that once you have multiple investments and multiple relationships with multiple studios, you can then actually provide enormous value. And it's not the value that really comes from you as the angel, but it's the value that comes from the network that you have created, connecting those studios so that they don't make the same mistakes that the others have made, potentially don't approach the wrong funder for the wrong reasons at the wrong time. There's an enormous amount that they can learn by just being plugged into an existing community who have all taken on the same type of funding from the same type of people.
Yeah, Teemu,
yeah, you guys don't like the term super angel, so what do you want to be called?
I think the audience can decide. By the end of the session, the audience can kind of pick it in.
I guess another one that was suggested by a colleague of mine was smart angels. Yeah, it's even worse, especially because it implies everyone else are dumb angels.
Yeah, well, it implies we're smart, which is...
Well, and there's that too, yeah, that's right. Or that you're some kind of weapon.
Yeah, I think the term actually defines really well what you guys are doing, so I don't know what the problem is.
Let's
guess
leave it with that for now.
I was talking last week with a studio, and this is the third or fourth time I've had interactions or monitored them. And depending upon who they're talking with, they'll say they've taken on Angel or they've taken on VC. And what they've done is they've taken on a relatively small amount, about £150,000 worth sterling, of tax-efficient money. It's a structure called SEIS, which we'll come back to. And that's from a fund which has only ever made one games investment before. Everything else they've done before has been in green technology or solar or a variety of things. And so in that sense, when they're talking about taking on Angel or talking about VC, it's very different to the kind of funding which you guys are talking about. I guess the differentiator is you're not only talking about providing the money, but all the other value add that comes with it. Whereas that particular studio was literally just talking about the money which they'd raised from someone. So let's talk a little bit about that, about the pros and cons of money from angels, smart angels, super angels, whatever you want to call them, but with everything else that comes on board from your games industry experience. Chris, you've had a huge amount of games industry experience, so where do you see the value add coming from you?
I guess hopefully it comes from a number of different areas. I think the main one actually really being is connecting them with a bunch of other studios that are at a different point in time of that trajectory. Going back to kind of raising funds through some kind of scheme that is an incentive to bring on funds. I have a real issue with people who are motivated to invest in your studio for anything other than they think it has a strong chance of having a good return on investment, and they're willing to help you do that. If they're just looking at the potential tax incentives of putting cash and deploying capital, then actually that never ends well, because their motivation is entirely different to your motivation. And although you may want and need the money, I would really kind of coach against taking on that funding. You really need to take funding from people who know why they're giving you the money and are giving it to you in order for you to be successful, not because they can complete their tax return and actually discount some money off that because they've given cash to you. In terms of the value, it changes depending on the stage and the life cycle that the studio is at. I'm now involved in a number of studios that really, when I go, I'm there to learn rather than to contribute. But the good thing is that I'm also involved in studios that are at an earlier point in their cycle, so there are still things that I can help them understand. So it's a bit of everything. I think the one thing that I do with every studio is try and encourage them to think about the end at the beginning. And I actually think that almost every studio I've ever come across never does that. So why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you building what you're building? What will it ultimately become? Does the world actually need what you're building? How many people will it be? And what kind of revenues are you expecting over what period of time? Most people actually just go from game to game to game to game. And what we're all trying to do is build businesses. Obviously build businesses in order to continue to build games, but you can't build those things in isolation. They are completely integrated and interwoven, and you need to understand both at the same time.
On top of that, I guess one of the big benefits is having been there before and having done it before. So active mentorship of the entrepreneurs. I made plenty of mistakes, and so I learned a thing or two that I hopefully can just pass on to other entrepreneurs as well and contribute value with that.
Yeah, okay, another definition. I think super angels actually are investing their own money, so they care. They need to understand where they're investing and why. Then VCs are investing other people's money, and they need to look good for, whatever is the theme for that season, so their decisions are going to be dependent on that. And I think that's the biggest difference if you compare angels and VCs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because, and not to necessarily put a shining light on angels and anything negative on VCs, but we don't have any subplot. We don't have any timing. We don't have to exit this investment at a certain point in time. We don't have to look good. We're not doing it for vanity. We're not doing it to fill a prerequisite in our portfolio. We're doing it because we believe in you and we want you to be successful and we think we can help. And the cleanest and clearest way in which you receive money is always the best. So you should always understand the motivations of the people that are involved, and I think the motivations of angels is often the cleanest and the most clear of why they're giving you the cash.
As an observation, I have just scheduled a meeting with a VC with whom I've been friends for a while, and the last 3 or 4 GDCs, we meet up together in San Francisco, and the third GDC, so the one furthest back, he said that he was super interested in mobile free-to-play. And then the next year, he said the priorities of the fund were in virtual reality and augmented reality. And this year, now on his Twitter bio, he tweeted me to set this up and said, hey, tell me about the London fintech scene, because that seems to be doing really interesting stuff. And the priorities vary. And this is a VC at one of the funds which is better regarded when it comes to games investment. So it's a great point, right? There's very, very few people who are specifically interested, and they're not putting their money in any event.
It's also a long journey, right? I think maybe the Supercell story is an outlier. It happened very well. It actually didn't happen quite quickly because there was Gunshine, and then they moved on to Heyday and then Clash. But it happened relatively quickly. The truth is, a successful studio takes a long time to build. It takes a number of failures. It then takes a long time to scale. It takes a while to sell. And then after you've sold it, it takes a while to earn that out. Realistically, that is a 7 to 10 year journey. Yeah. Now, most VC funds operate within a 7-year period, which is we deploy in 4 and we exit in 3. Now, if you're within that environment, and potentially you would receive the cash 2 years into their 4-year deployment, so actually you've only got 3 or 4 years to get it back. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You have to know what ride you're on. And I think because we've all built studios before, we know how long it takes, and we know that there will be some good times and there will be some bad times. And we will be there regardless. But the journey will be as long as it needs to be in order to get it right, not on some kind of time frame because we need the cash back.
So I'm going to ask another question on this vein, but just a reminder, you guys are welcome to ask any questions or disagree with the panelists at any stage. Debate's a good thing. Sorry, yes, you have to be very, very respectful of these people, of course. By all means, feel free to disagree. And by the way, you should all actively encourage fights and arguments between you three as well. And Reynat in due course, so I'm sure he's definitely going to get a certain amount of opinion. So are there ever any downsides to having equity investment from people who are very experienced in the games industry? When is it ever a bad thing?
Obviously, when there are conflicting interests, which might happen. But the main thing that I see where I don't fully deliver what my investments need is just time. I have my own company to run. I have a family. Those are my 2 top priorities. And then the investments get their share of time. And sometimes there's just none left. And
do you ever find, how do you channel providing advice to the studios rather than just telling them what to do because you're so experienced yourselves in having done this before? Do you ever find that to be a problem?
So I think that is one of the things you have to be careful of is that I guess 2 things. One is we're not investing in you to then kind of run your company. You have to have the capability to do it yourselves, and you have to have the capability to understand how to ask for our help and when to ask and what to ask and to contextualize the request. So the responsibility is on you. Don't assume that if you bring some angels together to invest, then all of a sudden you've got a leadership team for your studio. You haven't. You've got some people that will help when you ask. I have seen some angels that do believe that it's kind of some kind of pseudo mechanism for them to effectively start running the studio, and that's a very, very bad situation to get into. So I think that's when it can go wrong. But all investors kind of from time to time think that they can run the studio better than the founders. So you just always have to kind of watch that coming.
Yeah, I agree. Like a good super angel is looking forward, and they're not going to touch any operational issues like whether the car in the game needs to be green or red. Like that's not like their thing. Like they really need to think about how to position the company to get the next round of financing if that's needed, or potentially just focus on the strategy of the company, and if they touch any operational stuff, then you have the wrong person on board, in my opinion.
Teemu, maybe on that subject, unless Chris, you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I think one of the benefits that we bring is that inevitably, when you're running the studio, it's an enormous task, and it requires every hour of every day just to run the studio and to build the game and to be successful. I guess what the angel provides is that they're out in the outside world. They leave the studio, they're talking to other people, and they identify opportunities. I mean, I had a long conversation with Eric yesterday, and he talked about pattern recognition. So we see certain things happening, whether it's consolidation, whether it's VCs that become very, very active, whether it's the platform holders that are very, very specific about certain things that you need to integrate in order to get support. We can see those things, and we can bring that back to you. But that is purely a thought and an idea. It's not a make the car red because I just had this premonition that it needs to be red. It's more of a I can see what's happening in the industry, and this might be something that you want to take on board.
Gentleman had a question.
Hard to disagree about anything so far what you have said. But I have anyway one difficult question, and about this micromanager thing. Some guy someday said to me that it's a bit like marriage. You have to feel that you have good chemistry with the investor, that in personal level, the C level, the owners, because if you do the wrong choice, it's like a bad marriage. It can ruin your company. But anyway, my question is about the smart money. You are sort of like, if we think about game industry, you present smart money. You are the smart super angels, and then we might have also super angels in other industry, and okay, this is the opposite of smart, stupid. So I don't mean that they're stupid, but it's stupid in that. So stupid super angels. And usually when I have discussed with these smart money people, usually there is also this argument on the table. Okay, your company valuation is now this, like objectively, because I present smart money. For me, the valuation is something quite different because I'm smart, and I can help you to get the A and B round. Do you think that's fair, or should it be like that?
So I think, so to summarize the question, it's what role do you guys have in helping to influence valuation, either before or after you invest?
I think the question was also, is it suitable for us to bully valuation because we bring value? And the answer is no. So I don't think that's fair, and obviously it becomes enormously dilutive if all of a sudden everybody else says, well, I should be on the same terms. So all of a sudden you've had enormous cannibalization of your cap table just because I think I provide some help. I think that in situations where I have provided a lot of help, or I've been actively involved, there's been a separation, so the investment has been at the valuation that everybody is at, and then there are some kind of options or some kind of participation that exactly, that's a direct representation. I've seen a lot of people do it. I'm not a big fan of where you basically say, yes, your true valuation is X, but to me it should be Y, and that just makes no sense. If it's X and you're working hard to deliver X, then it's X. That's how it should be. And if I respect you and we are entering a marriage, I'm not sure we're married. I think your founders are married. I think I'm kind of a distant relative. But yes, if we're joining a family, then I have to enter that on fair terms, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, it could be even harmful for the startup, because dilution is too big, founders get incentivized. When there is a Series A and you really need the money, you might be diluted further, and then your shares shrink to tiny amounts, and that just doesn't make sense for anybody.
I agree.
I mean, I don't
No
know.
fight, Jess. Sorry.
Not everybody was here. There we go. I mean, not everyone was here for Eric's talk earlier this morning, but he made one really interesting point, which was after your second kind of larger fundraising round, as founders, you still have to collectively own more than 50% of the company. Because if you don't, then there's nothing getting you out of bed in the morning, and you don't control the business that you created.
That was a great point.
So we cannot, as angels, come in on your first fundraising round and have unrealistic expectations of the equity that we take from you, because you're going to have to fundraise at least 2 more times after we participate. So you still have to have an enormous amount of the cap table, even with our involvement. You have to be ready for further dilution. Otherwise, we've invested in something that will crumble.
Okay. I'm going to move on past this topic, although if people are particularly interested, when we come back to questions, we can come back to it. One of the things I wanted to come to was to circle back a little bit for each of you to tell us a little bit about a day in your life. So when you were involved in doing the angel work, what would be the kinds of things that you might ordinarily help your studios with?
Maybe like 2 ways to think about it. I think the most obvious way to think about it is when the founder is actually going to ask you something about the business, and then you're going to be talking about it, like giving your advice, opinion. And then on the other hand, I think Chris said it pretty well, is kind of understanding what's happening in the ecosystem. And if you see a clear trend, then you should be communicating that back to the company. And I think those are the 2 main main kind of paths on how to keep in touch with the.
Do you like to have regular board meetings? Do you believe in having particular information flow, or is it more on an ad hoc basis?
I think it's all of that, but really like all important decisions obviously need to be decided in the board meetings. And everything else is kind of like, you know, whatever happens type of stuff. But everything that's crucial to the business needs to be decided in the board meeting.
One of the things that we haven't talked about yet is that the matter of connections and being able to make introductions. Chris, you made an interesting point about a studio hypothetically coming to you and saying, we want to talk to Apple. And your reaction would be, why? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. One of your investee studios says, we want to have such and such an introduction. How would you tackle that?
That's usually the first one that you get asked from anybody is, can we have some money and can you introduce us to Apple? And actually, I would like to think that if you were to speak to any of the studios that I'm involved with, they were the least two interesting things that I provided, but they were the first things that everybody asks. But yeah, I guess the question is more, whenever you ask for anything from any of your investors, whether it's angels or VCs, you have to try to contextualize it as to why. Why am I asking? Why is this the right time? How am I going to deliver on that? And what is the result that I'm looking for? And how does that result then meaningfully move us towards the objectives that we've figured out? There's nothing worse than going to see a platform holder or an investor when the agenda is wrong, the timing is wrong, and you've got nothing to say. So yeah, I always try to push back onto all of the studios that I'm involved with is to say, listen, you have my time, you know, whenever it is available in amongst family and other things, but you have my time, you just have to ask for it wisely and you have to contextualize the request. It can't literally just be, can you introduce me to so-and-so or can you have a meeting with so-and-so? I have to understand why. And that's, I guess, going back to your point in terms of, you know, what does my daily life look like? It's trying to kind of take the leaders of the business out of the business momentarily, even for half an hour, to think about why they're doing what they're doing, and then they can go back and they can be much, much more effective. It's almost, I'm the one person that actually has the luxury of being able to think a little bit longer term while they're still worrying about the car being red or blue. I can think about why the car even is there in the first place. So it's pulling them out, having a think, and then putting them back in again.
And that's kind of the typical trap that you run into when you run a business on a day-to-day basis. So what I actually try to do when I run a company is establish that role to get me out of the daily business, because it's something that you desperately need when you are like neck deep into the daily business and running the company.
Yeah, I guess this starts turning back to the question of the advantages that you get from having super angels or smart angels, and for Klaas, it's especially an interesting question for you, because you had Gameforge, made a number of angel investments, and then you decided to do the whole thing again with flaregames. And so now that you're involved with flaregames, tell us a little bit more about how you do things differently, having had the benefit of that angel experience, which you didn't have so much when you were setting up Gameforge.
I guess it's both the angel experience and the experience from my Gameforge times. So I had like a year in between the two companies and came up with a list of 37 of the biggest mistakes that I made during the Gameforge time. I managed to repeat none of them, which is a good thing. I managed to have plenty of new mistakes, which is a good thing because I learned from them. I might be even better in my third company, but what I definitely did is apply those things or try to mentor the founders I was working with as an angel with the background of my learnings from my Gameforge times, and I see that it worked differently. So right now, when you compare how I build the companies, it's much more focused on the long-term vision, much more focused on the strategy. It's much more focused on looking at the market in a structured way and be proactive and not reactive to it. It's focused on culture, it's focused on communication, and how to build a place that everybody wants to be in and where everybody can contribute. Whether at Gameforge, I mean, when I founded the company, I was 23. I was so fucking green. And I just didn't know what I was doing. I tried out, and a lot of stuff worked for a lot of reasons. Luck was one of them.
So indulge me, but tell us one of the interesting 37 mistakes that you made with Gameforge, which you solved then with flaregames.
The biggest one was scaling too fast. So in Gameforge was widely successful, so we were like quadrupling revenues every year roughly, which is awesome, but it is a really crazy ride when you're in it. So you try to since you are basically producing cash every day, you are trying to solve it by throwing cash at problems, hiring bodies, and just putting them on top of problems as well. And this without having the processes, the infrastructure, the management. In the most crazy year, we grew from 170 to 420 employees within 12 months, which is like nuts. It's completely broken, and that's exactly what happened, surprisingly. That's something I would never repeat. I would rather hire top-down than bottom-up. I would implement processes and the right management know-how before scaling. You can't always do it because, I mean, there are stuff you have to get done, right? But it's the preferred solution to it.
And Teemu, tell us, we had an interesting conversation about the choices Next Games made when it was taking angel investment on, and how, I think as you put it, you were looking for guardians, or some of the angel investors were helping to open doors that you couldn't otherwise open yourself.
Yeah. So obviously on the seed round, we got in Jari Ovaskainen, who I mentioned already, and then Muafak Ahmed, who was chosen to be the investor of the year last year in Finland. So, you know, tremendous, like 2 super angels in Finland. But then during the Series A, we knew that, you know, in our business, like, you know, we wanted to work with IPs like The Walking Dead and what have you. I wanted to have people around me that actually know which IP might be big in 3 years, and for that reason, like, I gathered this like special team, like, or whatever you want to call them, that they're representing, you know, the studios, even the software industry, like the ex-CMO of Microsoft is one of our investors. And it's really like a group of people that should understand the business inside and out from every perspective that's relevant to us. So, and they were willing enough to come in during Series A, which is, you know, not the normal round for super angels. Like, you know, they're doing the seed investments. So they had to pay the premium, but even then, you know, they came in. And I think it's crucial that they actually have to put the money down and invest into the business, and not like somebody mentioned that, you know, I know shitloads of people, like, you know, used to give me, you know, my shares for half the price. Vice versa, they have to pay the same amount so that, you know, they're anxious enough to build a business. And all of these 12 people were willing to do that. And now, you know, I have a great network of people that I can call any day and ask about, you know, if another company did a deal with the movie studio, I might go like, you know, what do you know about it? Like anything we can learn about it and so forth. So yeah.
Would you do it again? I mean, 12 additional people on the table in the shareholder structure?
Totally. You know, just, you know, the list of names we have, I can't disclose, you know, every one of them, but, you know, if we would put it up there, like, I think you would do it again. Like, they're great people.
I'm sold.
Did it take long? That's a lot of people who are very busy. Did it take a long time?
Yes, it took like, you know, my whole professional career in games business, to be honest. So I knew most of these people from years back when I used to live in LA and so forth. Like, it's not gonna, I don't believe in the fact that, you know, somebody is gonna make an introduction, you're gonna meet a super angel, and then you decide and shake hands like, yes, fuck yeah, we're gonna do this together. Usually it doesn't happen like that. You need to know the people or person like from years back, and then you know how they're gonna behave if things go really well, if things actually go really bad, and so forth. So I knew most of these people, if not all, for many years.
It moves into a really interesting topic, which is the depth of connections and relationships there are in Europe between people like you and people with whom you've invested, and what that means for the European games industry more generally. And I know Eric in particular was interested in the benefits this provides to Europe, and the question about the US. Does this allow European game studios to compete more effectively? Or do you think comparison with the US is not really that helpful?
I think we can definitely compete more effectively because we tend not to make multiple mistakes in parallel. I mean, I'd be devastated if you know, 2 of the studios that I'm connected to made the same mistake at the same time, because then I've failed. And also, if we're identifying pattern recognition of certain things happening in the industry, then we would all have a conversation and say, listen, this is something that we've identified. I think it could be either interesting or a potential challenge for us. And I think we are, as a community, really strong. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we built playhubs in London, actually, because we looked at some of the communities, especially in Finland. I think the willingness to share and the willingness to engage and to kind of support each other's business is phenomenal. And it wasn't something that we were necessarily terribly good at in the UK, partly because of our console heritage. In console, people tended not to talk to each other because we were worried that we were all making the same game for the same publisher. But I think with mobile, it's essential that we work together and we talk amongst ourselves. And I think the European community, from the experience I've got, is really tight, really connected, really trusting, and willing to make each other's business really successful.
And on top of that, I mean, looking at Finland, it's more extreme there. I mean, in the ecosystem there is incredible. It's something that the rest of Europe should aspire to.
Yeah, actually, I think it's really simple. Like, I think the Finns understood that the better the industry does in the country, it's better for everyone. Meaning that, if there's multiple supercells in Helsinki, the chances of getting seed funding for all the new companies is much greater, and therefore, like, we just share a lot of the information. A lot of the companies have same investors, so you kind of like do it just because of having the same investors and what have you. But yeah, I agree. Like, if you compare Finnish companies to especially American companies, it's like a day and night. And hopefully it's going to stay like that. It's going to get really competitive this year, so a lot of companies are going to die. And I said it, like, it's true. Like, it's a tough market, and but I hope, like, everyone is going to keep helping everyone out, and at least so far, that's what it looks like.
And so on that note, just before we open up for a few questions, a couple of predictions, or some predictions from each of you, one prediction each about where you think 2016 will be going for the European games industry and what it might mean for Super Angels. I'll start with you, Chris.
My prediction is that VR will take a lot longer than anyone thinks to actually become a mass market scalable proposition.
If at all.
If at all. Yeah, I wasn't brave enough to say if at all. But if you're building a VR company and you assume that it can scale as quickly as mobile free-to-play scaled, then you need to get as much money on board as possible because you're in for a long wait.
But you're still looking to put money into mobile free-to-play?
Yes, at different stages. So less at the early stage, more in terms of... So I always follow on my investments. That's probably one thing we really didn't talk about. So I think it's critical that an angel follows on. For the reason that the new money is always looking to you to validate the business again and to validate the price of the business. So even if you came in at a couple of $1 million valuation and it's now 20, they're looking at you saying, okay, why is it 20? Now are you going to invest at 20? So you have to keep going. And I've kept on going all the way through to $100 million valuations where my contribution is in reality on the cap table, it's completely meaningless. But it's very meaningful because everybody felt confident that the people that were there at the beginning and have seen, a paper multiple are still there at the end, and so we're still investing. So I think, you have to continue on that journey. You have to be willing to do it. You have to ring fence funds to do it. So that's what I'm doing now. There are investment opportunities, I think, with companies that have profitable games and just want to scale, but they are at a much, much higher valuation and a much, much higher ticket size. So that's kind of the space that I think is an opportunity for angels. The early stage is getting harder and harder. Teemu's absolutely right. There's going to be some casualties because it's just too difficult for new studios to really make a dent.
It's just the development of every typical entertainment market. I mean, budgets go up, hit ratios go down, marketing gets more expensive, big brands enter the market or are used by existing studios to leverage, and not everybody can do that. And most companies should pray they have their most investment-heavy times behind them, because finding early stage investment is near to impossible right now. So Series A, and everything that is later stage, if you have proven and are just scaling.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of the gentlemen. And maybe one thing, like, anyone looking for funding, like, don't waste your time in VCs or people that don't have a long record of investing in games, because, like, those guys are not going to invest. And it's guys like like Chris that are going to make those investments because they understand the life cycle of the business and where the industry is. And so those are the only guys that are going to be investing in 2016, but they're not going to invest a lot. So, you know, the winter is coming.
I think just very quickly to pick up on one of Teemu's points in terms of what you've done with Next Games as well is whenever you approach anyone for investment, you know, be very, very clear on why. You know, what is their contribution? What have you seen that they've done in the past that you would like to kind of glean information from? Where is your business going, and who do you need to be on that journey? It's so refreshing when someone actually talks to you and said, listen, we're really interested in you being involved because of what you did with X and Y, and we think X and Y is really interesting and it has some relevance to what we want to do with our business. You know, with the fund that I'm part of is called Connect Ventures, and you know, we've got a lot of investments outside of games. And people approach us, and it's wonderful when they say, listen, we really love what you've done with City Mapper or Packed Coffee, or you know, not even the games investments. They're really inspired by what they could learn by investments and relationships that we have outside of games. So the fact that they've thought about it, the fact that they're having a conversation with you for a very specific reason that isn't just we need money and we heard that you might have some money. You really, really think about it. It doesn't take long. Take half an hour thinking, right, what business am I building? What is it going to look like? What would I like it to be? And who was involved in the things that look like what I'd like this to be? And I'll go and talk to them. It's a much, much stronger narrative, and you will get immediate engagement from those people because they know that they've been selected rather than just this kind of, you know, spray and pray approach for funding.
So I'm going to open things up for questions. I'm going to ask, we've got about 10 minutes. Please keep your questions short, sharp, sweet, to the point, out of respect for everyone else, because we haven't got that much time. And please forgive me if I'm brutal with you if you don't come to the question very quickly. Sir.
So what's the maximum team sizes, and what kind of business models are you in general interested in when it comes to the gaming industry?
So we'll start with the first one. Team sizes you were talking about that you look for.
From my perspective, you know, I've been doing this now for about 6 or 7 years. At the outset, it was great to, you know, find 6 or 7 people that had a really good idea, needed $1 million to get the idea to some form of soft launch, and then on the metrics we could then, you know, go and raise some more money. That was great. That doesn't exist anymore. $1 million isn't going to get them anywhere. Even when you get to soft launch with good metrics, there aren't any VCs that are really going to fuel that proposition. So that story's over. So for me, it's now a team of 20 to 30 to 40 that have multiple games. Ideally, they've had a game that's failed because they know what failure looks like, but they've been resilient enough to kind of, you know, regroup. Because that's one of the things that I look for, is not just rockstar talent, but resilience. Because, you know, you have to assume that at some point you will fail. So yeah, and what I'm looking for at the moment is people that have that game, and all they need is the opportunity to scale it, and also take the lessons from that game and then do another. But yeah, that kind of smaller team size, it's increasingly difficult. It's not extinct, but it's increasingly difficult.
I would agree for mobile free-to-play, mobile premium. I would not agree for other platforms like Apple TV. I just invested in an Apple TV company last week. The platform is not where it should be, and they are stretching out to the other TV streaming plug thingies. But there you can still do something that's meaningful with like 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people that really might change something. Yep. So where there's still, the market is earlier, not as competitive, not as mature.
Yeah, I think to put it like really simply, is like the amount of people needed to do what they want to do is the ideal size of the team, and that's it. Like, depends on like what they're doing.
Yeah, it's also a really good question because it underlies something else that's really important, which is focusing on the team. And I know, Chris, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. One of the problems I've often had, especially from British games developers, is a focus on the product. I want to make this game. Will you invest in that? And that's not what you guys are here for, right? You're not just there to invest in the product, but everything else that comes with it too.
Products come and go. I never invest in a product.
Yeah, I'm not a very good kind of, you know, my crystal ball is as cloudy as everybody else's. You know, I have some thoughts of where, you know, the market might go, but in truth, it's the team. And I don't think, I've maybe made one investment where the game that they were currently working on was the game that made the studio really successful. Everything else, it was the game that was much, much later in the cycle. So if I'd been assuming that that was the game, then that was a mistake. But the team was rockstar talent, they were resilient, and that they were humble. They're the three pillars. If you have all three, you will be successful. I can guarantee if you have all three, you will be successful. You will be able to secure the funding and the runway that you need to be successful. If one of those three is missing, I guarantee you will fail.
Thanks. I'd be interested to know how you personally deal with risk in terms of your investments, whether it's a matter of mixing early stage, later stage, whether there's a requisite minimum number to your personal portfolios, how you approach that. And the other half is exit. At what point do you start thinking about exit, or do you deliberately keep it out of your mind? Or what's the role of exit in your thinking, and when do you start implementing a process to get out?
Maybe we can start talking about the overall question of portfolio risk to begin with, and then go from there.
So I can only speak for me personally. I'm not that much of a risk-averse guy, so I'm early stage, seed stage, Series A, and I follow through with rounds after that, but it's not my main business. It has to have a certain size, so it should be like at least $250,000 of investment. Otherwise, the overhead is too big. I don't think about exit at all, to be honest. I think about building something that somebody wants to have, and then the exit will happen. But it's not like driving the company towards an exit route.
Yeah, fully agree. Like, my three investments, like they're all zero in my books, to be honest. Like I'm not thinking about the exit at all. If it happens, it happens. It's much more important to think about like how can I help the company, and then if there's a discussion that the company might be sold, then maybe that's the time when you start thinking about it. Like, is it the right time to sell or not?
And the right buyer.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, like if you if you think like a VC, then it's not going to work out.
Yep, I feel it's the same. It's certainly from an exit point of view, it's not something that kind of occupies my mind. I think that those opportunities arise when the company's ready and when the market's ready. In terms of risk, I like being in an early stage. I actually personally don't perceive it as a risk. I think the risk is not whether they're going to get it right, it's just whether they've got enough time to get it right. So I like risk. Risk's more fun. Being in a risky environment with rockstar talent is one of the most life-affirming things that you can do. So I don't want to de-risk the portfolio. I want to be as risky as possible because I believe that's where the fun is. It's funny, actually, someone said, it wasn't Reinout because he obviously hasn't got anything smart to say, which is the reason he's not here. But someone said as an angel, they said, actually, I give my studios the confidence to take risks. And that's what they said that their biggest value contribution was, is I give people confidence to take risks. I think that's one thing that I like to think that I do. And the other is that I stop them from worrying about things that happen all of the time. If you're a first-time entrepreneur and you think, wow, we're 2 weeks away from payroll and we don't have the money, it's refreshing for your angel to put your arm around them and go, you know what, that happens all the time. So don't, concentrate on the business and you will find a way through it. So it's allowing them to realize that where they think they're failing or the challenges that they're experiencing are common, and also giving them some confidence to take risks, because it's the ones that risk a lot that achieve a lot.
I'm grateful to the gentleman for asking that question, because you'll notice from asking it that these guys hadn't talked about their exit considerations at all until now. The only exit discussion was in relation to VCs feeling a little bit more pressure to achieve an exit because of their restrictions. So it's an interesting observation about the mindset of an angel or a super angel, that this isn't something that they worry about today, day-to-day they were talking about.
And for anyone who's running their own studio, don't think about it. Build a great company. That's all you have to do. It's all you have to do. I have this wonderful story. For 30 seconds, I'll tell you. I spent a lot of time over with the guys at Supercell. I was hoping that I would be able to return from Helsinki with this kind of little magic potion, this thing that, why were they successful, that I could just plant across all of the other investments. And as I was leaving, I said, listen, I would love if you could give me the magic potion. If you could just tell me the one thing. I'm sure it must be A/B testing or performance marketing or whatever it might be. And they said, okay, we'll tell you. Lean in, we'll tell you. And they said, make great games. And it was so refreshing. And actually, I just thought, make great games, build a great company, don't worry about anything else.
How do you think that distance affects the willingness of investors? Okay, if you think about angels, super angels, or VCs, I see that, for example, transatlantic investments from States or from China, even to Finland. Really difficult to make that happen. Really difficult. And even in Europe, okay, from example from Switzerland to France, quite difficult. But if but if you are in the same country with the company, do you want to really, be with your family in the same country, or is it okay that they are in another country? And what about the juridical and cultural differences? Do they affect as well?
I'd suggest we focus not so much on the transatlantic side, but I think the European side is particularly interesting, with each of you being representatives of different countries. What are the push and pull factors about investing outside of your own country but within Europe?
I don't mind the country, to be honest. So I have an investment in New Zealand, I have one in Japan, I have an investment in Finland, I have some in Germany, I have some in the US. It doesn't matter. It's about the people and wherever they are.
Exactly. Don't look at the map. Look at the games, look at the team. And if they're great, then it makes sense. But I don't think countries matter at all.
Yeah, I agree. But also I think the community is relatively small, so you can have people locally that are spending more time with the business. So Teemu and I have just co-invested in a studio in Helsinki, and we're on the board of a studio in Stockholm, and the network is incredibly small. So in truth, even if you can't be there all of the time, somebody can.
Okay, on that note, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists, and we'll all sit down, except I think we've got a special announcement from you, Klaas, right?
Yay! So, as most of you know, I'm not only here as a super angel, but the founder of flaregames as well. And now I'm walking over to the laptop because we have prepared something. We would love to officially announce a deal that we made with a game that kept me hooked and open and awake at night for hours and hours and hours. We prepared a little something, and actually you will have the opportunity to play the game. Is there sound?
Hello from Tampere, Finland. We are Playhubs. Hi! We've come out of company stealth mode and are delighted to officially present Project Nonstop. Alongside flaregames, we'll be bringing this virtual party adventure for mobile devices to you soon. For now, check this out.
So, we are having a small reception later today. There is a colleague of me somewhere, John, wave. If you want to come, you are all happily
from
invited,
Tampere,
and
Finland.
it's on auto-repeat. It's one of these rare moments when you see a product get totally hooked and are sitting in a plane to Tampere 2 days later. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it's a nice city, a great team. Now you are going to say something about you know them for longer and you saw the game just before me, and you did. So, join our reception tonight. You will be able to play the game, feel the addiction yourself, and we are looking forward to launching it over the next month. Have a great day. Go talk to John. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.